Imagine living in a city where hunger is so severe that people begin to whisper an unthinkable rumor. Not about murder, not about theft, but about human meat. In the winter of 1946, just 1 year after the World War II ended, Germany was barely recognizable. Entire cities had been reduced to rubble, millions were homeless, food had almost disappeared. Every day became a fight to survive. Then, just days before Christmas, a woman searching for firewood in the ruins of Dresden stumbled upon something that would horrify an entire nation: a human leg. It had been carefully severed at the knee, wrapped in newspaper, and stripped off nearly all its flesh. Nearby, investigators found more bones. They noticed something even more disturbing. Large portions of muscle had been deliberately removed. Almost immediately, a terrifying question spread across the starving city. Was someone eating people? Or was something darker happening behind the scenes? This is the chilling story of one of post-war Germany's most disturbing murder cases. A case that blurred the line between survival, greed, and pure human depravity. To understand how something this horrifying could happen, you first have to understand Germany after World War II. The war had officially ended, but peace didn't mean life returned to normal. Far from it. Entire neighborhoods had vanished beneath mountains of rubble. Electricity was unreliable. Heating fuel was scarce. Food shortages became a daily nightmare. Many families survived on little more than watery soup and scraps of bread. Some people walked for days into the countryside hoping to trade their last valuables for a few potatoes. Others simply starved. Dresden was among the hardest hit cities. After the devastating Allied bombing campaign, much of the city still looked like an enormous graveyard of collapsed buildings. Every day, workers and civilians searched through the ruins, clearing debris piece by piece. It was during one of these ordinary searches that everything changed. A woman collecting wood noticed something hidden beneath the rubble. At first, it looked like discarded trash wrapped in newspaper. When she moved closer, she realized it wasn't trash at all. It was a human lower leg. Police quickly arrived at the scene. The limb had been cleanly separated at the knee joint using a sharp knife rather than a saw or heavy tool. Not far away, investigators found additional bones. But something immediately caught their attention. The bones were unusually clean. Most of the surrounding flesh had been carefully removed. This wasn't the damage you'd expect from decomposition. Someone had intentionally cut it away. For detectives already working in a city plagued by hunger, the discovery led to an almost unimaginable theory. Had someone butchered a human body just to eat it? The rumor spread through Dresden almost overnight. People already desperate for food began wondering whether human flesh had somehow entered the black market. No one knew what to believe, but everyone wanted answers. The first challenge was simple. Who was the victim? There were no fingerprints, no complete body, no obvious identification, only scattered body parts wrapped in newspaper. Then, a few days later, investigators finally caught a break. A woman named Kathy Stiller had recently been reported missing. She had disappeared on December 11th along with our 7-year-old son. Neither had been seen since. As detectives compared medical details with the recovered remains, the horrifying possibility became increasingly likely. The severed legs belonged to Katie, but her son was still missing. Now, investigators knew they weren't searching for an accident. They were hunting a killer, and statistics gave them their first clue. Even today, most murder victims know the person who kills them: partners, friends, relatives, co-workers. So police started where Kathy spent most of her time, her workplace. During interviews with employees, one name kept coming up: a co-worker named Frieda Lehmann. Several witnesses recalled seeing two women together frequently before Katie disappeared. At first, nothing about Frieda seemed especially suspicious. She lived alone, her husband had vanished during the war. Like thousands of other Germans, she appeared to be another ordinary survivor trying to rebuild her life. But when investigators visited her apartment, everything changed. Inside, they found Katie's personal belongings, her clothes, her handbag, items that should have never been there. And then they noticed something else: dried bloodstains. Not one, but several, in both the kitchen and the living room. Suddenly, this was no longer a missing persons investigation. Police arrested Frieda immediately. At first, she denied everything. Then she blamed an unknown stranger. Later, she accused her own brother. Her story changed over and over again. The detectives kept pressing. Eventually, she broke, and what she confessed to was almost impossible to believe. According to her confession, Frieda invited Katie to her apartment under the pretense of a friendly visit. There was no argument, no warning, no struggle before the attack. Instead, prosecutors believed Frieda waited for the perfect moment. Then, without hesitation, she pulled a knife across Katie's throat. The wound was catastrophic. Modern forensic experts, who later reviewed the case, concluded that the blade cut deep enough to reach the spinal column. It wasn't a shallow slash. It was a deliberate attempt to kill as quickly as possible, yet that wasn't immediate. Despite the massive injury, Katie somehow managed to stagger from the kitchen into the living room before collapsing. Blood sprayed across the walls, furniture, and floor. The crime scene revealed exactly how desperate those final moments had been. By the time she stopped moving, there was no saving her. But the horror wasn't over, because there was still one witness left inside the apartment. Her 7-year-old son. The child had seen far too much. And Frieda made a decision that would transform a brutal murder into one of Germany's darkest criminal cases. She killed him too. 2 victims, a mother and her little boy, gone within minutes. But strangely, that wasn't the part investigators struggled to understand. Murder, while horrifying, was something detectives had seen before. What came afterward was something else entirely. Instead of fleeing the apartment, Frieda stayed. She began dismembering both bodies. Investigators later determined that she used ordinary kitchen knives, carefully separating limbs at the joints. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't chaotic. The cuts suggested patience, method, control. Body parts were wrapped in newspapers before being carried away and scattered across different parts of Dresden. It was an obvious attempt to make identification more difficult, and for a while it worked. But one question continued haunting everyone involved in the investigation. Why remove so much flesh? Transporting a body in smaller pieces explained the dismemberment. It explained why the limbs had been separated. But it did not explain why large amounts of muscle tissue had disappeared completely. That mystery refused to go away. Then investigators uncovered another disturbing detail. Neighbors admitted that Frieda had given them meat shortly after the murders. She claimed it was horse meat. Considering the desperate food shortages, nobody questioned her generosity. In fact, they were grateful. For many families in 1946 Germany, meat of any kind had become almost impossible to obtain. People accepted what they were offered without asking too many questions. Only later did police realize the horrifying timeline. The meat had appeared immediately after Katie and her son disappeared. When confronted, Frieda offered several different explanations. At one point, she claimed she'd burned the pieces of flesh in her stove. Later, she admitted giving meat to neighbors. The statements were inconsistent, sometimes contradictory, but they all pointed toward one terrifying possibility: that at least some of the missing human flesh had never been recovered because it had been distributed as food. Whether Frieda herself ever consumed human flesh has never been conclusively proven, and that's an important distinction. Many articles sensationalize the case by calling her a cannibal, but the historical evidence is less certain. What investigators could establish was this: human flesh had been removed from the victims. Large portions were never found. Neighbors unknowingly received meat from Frieda during the same period. Whether that meat was actually human or whether Frieda repeatedly lied to confuse investigators remains one of the biggest unanswered questions in the entire case. Ironically, modern forensic science might have solved that mystery within hours. DNA analysis, microscopic tissue testing, even tiny biological traces could have revealed exactly what happened. But in 1946, none of those tools existed. Detectives relied on witness statements, confessions, and physical evidence that was often incomplete. Once the meat disappeared, so did the chance ever to know the full truth. And that uncertainty is exactly what has kept this case alive for nearly 80 years. Because perhaps the worst part isn't what investigators proved, it's what they never could. As investigators dug deeper into Frieda's life, they searched for an explanation, not an excuse, an explanation. She had grown up in a deeply abusive household. Her father was reportedly a violent alcoholic, and psychologists who later studied the case argued that years of emotional neglect may have left her almost completely detached from empathy. But trauma alone doesn't create a murderer. Millions of Germans had experienced unimaginable suffering during the war. Almost none of them committed crimes like this. Which is why experts believe greed, not starvation, was likely the primary motive. After killing Katie and her son, Frieda didn't simply dispose of the bodies. She broke into their apartment. She stole clothing and personal belongings. Anything she believed still had value in a country where almost everything could be traded on the black market. The murders weren't committed to survive. They were committed to profit. Investigators concluded that the dismemberment was largely practical. A single woman would have struggled to move two complete bodies through a devastated city without attracting attention. Smaller pieces were easier to hide, easier to transport, and easier to scatter. But no practical explanation could fully answer the question everyone kept asking: what happened to the missing flesh? Even during Frieda's trial, the possibility of cannibalism dominated public attention. Newspapers fueled speculation. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some people became convinced that a cannibal had been living among them. Others believed the story had been exaggerated by fear and desperation. The court ultimately focused on what it could actually prove: the murders, the dismemberment, the theft, not the rumors. Frieda was found guilty and sentenced to death. In July 1947, she was executed by guillotine. Her case was officially closed, but many of its darkest questions never were. Did she truly feed human flesh to her neighbors? Or were those final statements simply another attempt to mislead investigators? Did anyone unknowingly consume it? Or did the missing flesh disappear for another reason entirely? No surviving evidence can answer those questions today, and that's exactly why historians still debate this case. When people hear the word cannibal, they often imagine someone driven by an uncontrollable urge to eat human flesh. But this case is far more disturbing than that, because it wasn't simply about cannibalism. It was about what happens when an entire society collapses. When hunger becomes normal, when law enforcement is overwhelmed, when cities lie in ruins, and when ordinary people begin making choices that would have been unimaginable just a few years earlier. The true horror isn't that one woman committed an unspeakable crime. It's that the conditions after the war made almost any rumor believable. In a city where families searched through rubble for scraps of food, where children disappeared, where bodies were discovered in pieces, the idea that human flesh might be sold as meat no longer sounded impossible. Whether cannibalism actually occurred may never be proven, but the fear itself tells us everything about post-war Germany. It reveals just how completely society had broken down. Almost 80 years later, the case of Frieda Lehmann remains one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in German history. Not because every mystery was solved, but because some of the most terrifying questions never were. And sometimes, what we can never prove is far more unsettling than what we can. I would love to hear your thoughts below. I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.